Hey everyone, Church of SDFU. So I was having a little discussion with Watcher Azazel in the comment section because I made my own video on the Sharia courts and arbitration. And my position is that for certain instances of civil law, like divorces, I would probably consider forcing people to use the standard law system that everyone uses instead of allowing arbitration. And we kind of disagreed on that point. Watcher Azazel thinks that people should be free to choose whatever system they want and generally should be able to choose to do whatever they want as long as all the parties are consenting, which is, I guess, the kind of consistent libertarian position. And yeah, I'm not, I guess, in that instance as libertarian, and I was thinking about it, and so the reason why is because I do not think that freedom or liberty is a universal good, which I think is kind of something that, in the way that the word is used today, is usually how it's perceived. Yes, of course, freedom is always, the most important thing. Better to die, what is it, better to die on your feet than live on your knees, or all of those sayings. Better dead than red. So freedom being just a universal absolute good that kind of supersedes everything. And I don't believe that's true. I believe, for me, I'm a person that doesn't really believe in free will, that doesn't believe in absolute morality, although I'll have to make a video because I do believe there are certain features of morality which are semi-absolute to human beings, but that's more detail in another video. But I don't believe in those things. So I don't really believe in the concept of virtues or rights which are universal and absolute. And that applies to freedom and liberty. I don't believe they are absolute goods. So if I want to put them as goods, I have to justify why I think they're a good thing. And the reason why I think they're almost always a good thing is because they're in tune with how human beings work. They're in tune with how our thinking process works. Human beings value freedom and liberty, just like they value other things like equality. And this is, to me, I believe that's mainly due to the an evolutionary process which encouraged those features. And I mean, this is just pure conjecture, but I think kind of these beings like us, beings with a higher intelligence, they're features that probably are quite likely to come out as well, because I think there's a certain affinity between intelligence and wanting to have things like liberty and equality and compassion and things like that. But that's an aside. But so I think that's why we have these things, and why they're still an important and good thing is because that's the way we work. They're generally things that, if we have them, make us happy. So if you give a person everything, but you put them into the gilded kind of cage, they'll still not be quite happy. Or actually, they could be quite unhappy, because they're not free, and we intrinsically value freedom. So in almost all cases, a free human being will be a happier human being. But I think that freedom, or at least freedom in some respects, can be superseded by certain kind of events that would have a harsher impact on the well-being and happiness of the person in question. And I guess the extreme example I just want to use is a practice in a certain kind of rural Indian kind of areas, where if the husband dies, the widow is expected to kill herself by lighting herself on fire and immolating herself until she dies. And there are quite a few cases still to this day where women aren't physically forced to do this. They choose to do this. And the reason why they choose to do this is because they have enormous social pressure put on them. And everything they've been taught tells them that this is the right thing, the good thing to do. So one part of the common exchange was, well, how do I know what's good for a person? How do I know what's going to make a person happy? Well, I mean, I can't be absolutely sure, but this extreme case as an example, I'm fairly confident that I know better for that woman in almost all cases what is good for her than the woman knows herself in that instance when she's actually going to set herself on fire. She's not just killing herself, but she's killing herself in a painful way that will make her suffer severely before she dies. So, I mean, it might seem somewhat arrogant, but I do think I know better, because I'm in a situation where I have additional information which allows me to come to the conclusion that that is not in her best long-term interest at all. And so I think a similar concept applies, although the situation when it comes to divorce is less harsh. I think there's certainly situations where women can get convinced or bullied into accepting a certain kind of legal judgment which disadvantages them. So maybe they get less of the property, maybe they get less access to the children, or no custody rights at all. In the arbitration Sharia court, as an example. And what if we force them to go to a regular court? Then we would be taking away a lot of that social pressure, because the woman doesn't actually have the choice. So people can't pressure her into choosing the Sharia court. And of course you can make the argument that people can then pressure her to give the money back, or not visit the children, or give the children up. But I think making sure that the initial verdict gets done in a court that has a standard that is accepted by all of society is going to make it likelier that the result will be more equitable than if it went through a different biased court system and never actually went through that court system in the first place. And so I think that in that instance, I think that law is a way to help protect vulnerable people. And to me, law is always one of the worst, crudest kind of methods. Law to me is a lot like war. It's a last resort. It's when you can't find any other reasonable way of fixing a problem, you have to go to law, and you have to just force people to do it a certain way. But just as with violence, or whatever, not violence, force, just like with force, I think there is a time where it's appropriate. And yes, it is an important question to ask. Well, can you be sure that it's appropriate? Well, no, you can never be 100% sure. But can you be reasonably sure? And I think there are cases where I can be reasonably sure that it's the appropriate thing to try to force people to act in a certain way. And of course that shouldn't be my decision, that shouldn't be any individual's decision. That should be a combination of a kind of social contract decision, society at large making certain values, and it should, most importantly, as far as possible, be a decision based on sound science, in terms of how human beings work, so science, social sciences, anthropology, psychology, all of these things have to come together. And then we should still not do it willy-nilly. We should still, I think, pretty much in most cases, when there's any question, err in favor of giving people freedom and liberty, because it's really that important. It's really such a fundamental right to such a fundamental concept to how human beings work and to how our society works. But I think there are situations where there is such overwhelming evidence that we should not allow people to act in a certain way, even if that is what at that moment they choose to do. And ultimately that is because I do not believe in free will. I believe that people can have the freedom of action, but we can never truly be free, because we're comprised of our genetics and of the inputs that change our brains throughout our lifetime, and a lot of that is social influence and the experiences we have. So often people lack necessary information to make good decisions, and it's our responsibility as a society to get to a point where everyone has enough information that we don't need to restrict people anymore in how they can act, that we can just get rid of laws altogether, basically. But I think we're a far away from that. And so until then, I think it's a case-by-case basis, always erring on the side of freedom. But I think there are instances where it is right to force people to adhere to a common standard. And it's not a special standard, so we shouldn't make a special standard for a certain group. If we do make a standard, then it needs to be a common standard, where we say that that is a standard that all of society can agree on, and that is scientifically valid, and then we need to move ahead with that. And yes, it will always be a slippery slope. There will always be the danger of people imposing standards that are restrictive to other people unnecessarily. But I think that is always the risk. And the balance we're striking here is one where we balance the pressures from society as a whole against the pressures that an individual being may face in their local circumstance. So the pressures that might be put up on them by their local community, or by their own experiences, or their lack of information in some sense. Anyways, Church of STFU, I'll stop here before it gets to be one of my long epic videos again. I will see you guys all later.